Today, we'll journey through the blood-soaked history of executions, from the guillotine to the electric chair, and we'll unravel the mysteries of the afterlife. From heaven to hell and the fascination with reincarnation. We'll talk about the eerie tales of those who have claimed a glimpse beyond the veil, and we'll circle back around and we'll look back at what we've covered in the 2 parts that we've had so far. So, if you're ready to dive in, so am I. Thank you for joining me on Beneath the Shadows. Alright, yeah, so thank you for joining me. My name is Travis Fenn. I am your host here on Beneath the Shadows, coming at you, as always, from the Shadow Realm, my office studio here in Ypsilanti. I just want to say thank you so much for being here. Thank you for checking out the show. Thank you for coming back if you're a return listener. I really appreciate it. And just a couple of things before we dive into part 2 here of dying, these episodes on dying, death rituals, executions in the afterlife. We did death rituals last week. We are going to tackle executions in the afterlife this week. So if you haven't checked out part 1, maybe go ahead and check out part 1 before you check out part 2 here. They aren't, really connected in the way where you chronologically need to have 1 before you have 2, but I might make some references this week that reference back to part 1, so being able to know what I'm talking about in some sense might be good for you. And if you don't care, then you don't care, and you can check out this one first. I don't care. I appreciate you being here, like I said. And we're going to be looking at, like I said, executions and the afterlife today, and that's going to cover a bunch of different crazy ways that were used over the years to execute people, and then also talk a little bit about what people's beliefs in the afterlife kind of include, and what some people have seen when they've went beyond the edge and had those near-death experiences. And if you're cool with that, all I have to say then is please give the show a rating and review on iTunes or Spotify or Amazon Music or wherever you listen to your podcasts at. A rating, a review are very helpful, and I appreciate the fuck out of everyone who takes the time to do that. It really means a lot to me, and I just can't say thank you enough. So beyond that, there is an Instagram page, Beneath the Shadows Podcast on Instagram, if you'd like to follow me there. I did just get a group on Facebook going, so if you'd like to follow on that, it should be under the same name, Beneath the Shadows Podcast, and you just look for the classic logo and you'll be able to find it. Other than that, though, there is a Patreon page if you want to support the show. It's $3 a month right now. The only thing you're getting are episodes every week, and you can get your episodes there. And if I ever, get the sponsors down the line, if I do get someone that can be, a sponsor ad on here, those shows will not have the sponsors or ads in them. Beyond that, though, you could also just, tell people about the show. Word of mouth is key right now and is great for spreading the show, especially since I do not really have a marketing or advertisement budget to be able to, promote myself in ways on different shows or in certain websites or whatever it may be. I don't have the excess cash for that currently, so word of mouth and being able to have people who listen tell other people is, the best way for me to spread the show and expand my listeners and viewing on this. So, but yeah, check me out, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. You can also find us on YouTube and pretty much anywhere where you can get your podcasts at. And with all of that out of the way, that's just a little bit of housekeeping there. We are going to dive into part 2 of dying, death rituals, executions, and the afterlife. Alright, so when did executions start? When are we talking about? Why did people start killing other people? And, why did people start bopping and chopping and flopping and dropping these fools? I just don't know. Since civilization started itself, since people came around and were sentient enough to, kill each other. And in reality, killing has always been a part of nature. It's just a natural thing that happens, and killing each other, as the world has developed, is not as much of a natural thing with, human beings and people who have more of the, the developed mindset of a human being with, being sentient, having feelings and emotions, and being able to feel empathy and sympathy and things of those nature. Since that has happened and developed in human beings, in Homo sapiens, since that has developed, it's not really been a thing that is as acceptable as it always was throughout history. Killing was just part of nature for a long time, even with regular people. As humans developed, as biology took hold, and we came into being who we are nowadays, the Homo sapiens, from Neanderthals and everything of that nature. From coming into who people have become today, there has always been killing, always been a part of society, and capital punishment is a part of that. So capital punishment was used since civilization began. It evolved from primitive tribal practices to modern capital punishment. History of executions has been a big part of keeping people in line, keeping things in order, keeping rulers where they're supposed to be, keeping royalty in their place, things of that nature. Many times when royalty, when clergy, when the oligarchies were challenged, they would take that out on the people who were trying to overthrow them, or were trying to challenge their ruling, or were trying to undermine their word, and they would kill them in public execution. That's treason of the high throne type of shit right there. And societies have used executions as punishment, deterrence, and spectacle. So all three of those. So they used it to, punish people, to deter other crimes from happening, and then they also would use it kind of for show. If there was someone who did not show any value to this world, or if there was someone, like I said, who needed to be punished, sometimes they would just throw those as spectacles. And, they would do that in, say, Rome. They would put them in the Colosseum, and that could be torture or battling between two, multiple prisoners or whatever it might be. Or it could be, like fighting against, animals back in the day, like lions and weird, crazy shit like that. Methods ranged from quick and efficient to brutal and torturous. There is a comprehensive history of executions worldwide, from ancient times to the present. So today, as we take a look at executions and the afterlife, we are going to go in kind of a chronological type of order, where we start in BCE, way back in the day, way before any of our times. And we're going to look at the ancient and prehistoric kind of rituals that they used for executions, and the way that they performed these executions. And we're going to venture through time, a little bit here, a little bit there. We're going to talk about a few different places and parts of time, and we're going to look at the way that they did executions themselves. And we are going to venture all the way up to where we're at today in 2025. We're going to venture and see what people have done throughout history, maybe take a detour or two, and then we're going to pop into the afterlife and kind of go through it in a similar order, where we will go chronologically. And then when we end back here again at 2025 after the afterlife, we will take a look at our main marks for today. We will go into our final takeaways, and we will get out of here at the end of the show and put dying behind us. It's technically in front of us. If you're listening, it's definitely in front of you in some sort of way. And we're going to put it behind us, though, after the end of the show today. We're going to do that, and then we have a good show, always have a good show coming up week after week. So reminder to come back, check out the show every week. We're trying to come out every Wednesday. I know this one's late. I know the last couple of weeks have been late. I appreciate you being here and checking out the show regardless. I know it hasn't been as consistent. There's been quite a bit going on, and with running the show myself, sometimes if I need to take a day off to go and do this or go and do that, whether it be, go and visit some family, or, my grandpa just passed very recently in the past couple of weeks here, and I had to go to the funeral, and that took, quite a bit out of my time. And there's nothing wrong with that. You got to be there for your family, and got to be there for those who you appreciate when you can be. So, didn't have a problem with doing that, but it did take a chunk out of the time that I was able to dedicate to doing research, script writing, recording, editing, and the endless amount of things that come with trying to launch a podcast and get this thing really off the ground. So appreciate you being here. Let's dive into executions and get to fucking killing some people. Yeah. So let's go back in time. Let's take the time machine and head way back about 5,000 years, 5,000 years, a little bit somewhere around there. Let's go back to 3000 BCE, and we'll talk about that up until about, CE time, 500 CE time, somewhere around there. We're going to talk about early human sacrifices and tribal justice, the way that they did it way back in the day, and talk about some of the ways that they would execute their traitors, the people who broke the law, and the people who were treasonous to the crown, or to the, early rulers back in those days. Also, side note, very quick side note before I start into this. I realized while doing editing for last week's episode, part 1 of this little two-parter, that I use a lot of filler words, and I would like to avoid using filler words as often. And I know it's a confidence thing. I know it's a, comfortability thing, and I'm going to try to avoid using or so or as often as I did last week, because I definitely overdid it quite a bit. I will probably do it still every once in a while. Sometimes I have a hard time collecting my thoughts, and I use filler words to, delay for like I just did. I sometimes use filler words to help collect my thoughts and give me an extra second or two to put a coherent thought and sentence together in my head before I say it. And sometimes I'll use those filler words like or so or and I apologize for it being a little aggressive and over the top last week. But with that, let's dive into old-timey. Right now, it's going to be some old-timey early human sacrifices and tribal justice. So, before organized civilizations, executions were often ritualistic sacrifices to appease gods or ensure social cohesion. Early societies, like the Mesopotamians and Egyptians, used execution to punish crimes or maintain divine order. Methods included bludgeoning, beating someone to death, drowning, obviously tossing them in a river or fucking sticking their head underwater or in a bucket or something of that nature, and ritualistic stabbings. So they would do a ritual that involved stabbing a person to death, and they would sacrifice them to whatever god it may be, to, say, bring good crops this year, to bring good weather this year, to appease the god of death that needed to have a sacrifice every night, and if he didn't get a blood sacrifice, it would start raining acid, so they needed to kill someone. Things of that nature, and that would go, well, it went well back in the day. It would not go as well nowadays, that is for sure. So let's talk about Mesopotamia a little bit closer. So Babylonia, Assyria, and Sumer. I believe it's Sumer. It's Sumer. It's Sumer. I believe it's Sumer. So they had the Code of Hammurabi in 1754 BCE, which prescribed death for murder, robbery, adultery, and sorcery. And that was, one of the first kind of really established, written in stone types of executions that they did for punishing those who committed crimes. A lot of the time, around there, before there's two things that people would do, and this was kind of the first, or one of the first that was really acknowledged and proven to have been implemented to strictly punish people. But the two things that really they did for punishment throughout history, throughout entirety of civilizations, is you're either going to do hard labor for a punishment, or you're going to be tortured or executed. It's kind of one of those, I guess, three things, but torture and execution kind of go together, and then hard labor is a form of torture, I guess, or it could end up killing you, but they didn't really imply it to be like that. It was more of a laborious punishment, so you're supposed to be working 12 fucking 10, 12, 16 hours a day doing something very hardcore laborious, and then you don't get fed enough, you don't get enough water, you're getting kind of tortured in numerous ways as you do that also. But with that, they have the Code of Hammurabi, and that prescribed those deaths for murder, robbery, adultery, and sorcery. In common methods that were used to implement this death for these crimes was drowning. Again, they would drown people in the rivers, in buckets, in pails, in any way that they could, really, to kill these people. I don't think they would weigh them down and toss them in the river, but they would just, someone would hold their head under type of shit, or multiple people. They would do impalement, which is always a fun one. They would, sometimes do like kind of Vlad the Impaler type of shit, where they prop them up on a stick and let them slowly slide down it, or they would slowly insert it with some sort of force. But I know like Vlad did some shit where he would prop him up on this stick or on this piece of whatever it might be, stone or whatever, and he would let gravity do the rest of the work. So you prop them up on it, insert it into their orifice, and when you have it inserted into their ass there, you just let them fucking gravity slide down, and ends up killing them, tearing apart their intestines, tearing apart their insides. And eventually, if you really let it go, or if you put some extra pressure on it, go all the way through that motherfucker and come out his goddamn mouth, come out his neck or something, come out his shoulder. Sometimes it would just come out a random part of the top of their body. Terrifying and horrible in so many ways. Beyond impalement, there was also burning alive, which is a great one. That's just a lot of fun. Keep you warm, keep you toasty, and burn your skin off. I hate getting even the smallest burn. I just burned my fingers recently, and that shit, it didn't hurt so much right when it happened and shit, but like, within 24 hours, my fingers were like, what the fuck just happened? What the hell is this? And that's like, a first degree burn or some shit. It's not even anything that serious. And you get up to like third degree, or, as serious as it can be, and your whole body's covered in, third degree plus burns or whatever, second, third degree, over 70+% of your body. Like, you're not going to be feeling good, and your body's not going to be able to cope with that, and you will die. And that's not going to be good, nice, non-painful death like the next one might be. And the next one is beheading. Getting your head chopped off in one way or another. Oftentimes it was, a sword or axe and a stone. You lay your head down just sideways, and they chop you at the fucking neck and take your head off and let you, bleed out. And since your spinal cord is disconnected from your head, you end up dying anyway within seconds. You might have a couple of seconds, 2, 3. I think there's a scientific study that said technically your head can last for 3 or 4 seconds, something like that, without being attached to your body. It still has enough blood in there before the blood comes out and ends up, shutting down. And with no oxygen, no blood, it's going to shut down real fast. And I think it was like 3 or 4 seconds that it said you could last. And yeah, that's just crazy to think about. Also, getting beheaded, and still, for whatever reason, for just a second, your head starts falling, and the only thing that your head can think at that time, it's not even about the pain, because your endorphins are kicking so fucking hard, your dopamine and shit is kicking, all those chemicals that are kicking incredibly hard in your head, especially at that point, if you had something so traumatic happen to you. Your head's going to kick out so many different chemicals to try and block that pain, to try and, keep your brain as alive as possible. It's not going to be able to do it, obviously, but your head falling off of this rock, or off of the guillotine, or whatever we're going to talk about coming up, the other things that have been used throughout history for beheading, and we're going to, like, your head falls off of there, and it's just staring back at your body, and you're like, oh my God, oh. And that's probably all you would get out of out of yourself is singular, oh my God, or like, help me, or is that my body type of shit. Like, you'd be so shocked, and obviously you'd be shocked because your head and body just got separated, but not just the shock of the trauma, the shock of actually just seeing your body with no head on it would be wild to think about. It's just like, I can't even think about how that would affect me, or like how what I would think about it. Like, what would come up. Executions were often reserved also, as I said, for high treason. You're going to be disrespectful, and you're going to be non-loyal. You're going to be unloyal to the crown. You are going to get tossed in a fucking ditch and thrown in the river and cut up until the fish come and eat your body. So, methods for these type of crimes, treasonous crimes, included crocodile feeding. That's a great one. I like that. You're going to make that body fucking disappear, and that's the way it should be. I'm just telling you, no, don't do it. Don't go out and do this. But if you ever need to kill someone, if it comes up for some reason, don't do this. But if it does come up for some reason, feeding their body to a crocodile might be a pretty solid way to get rid of it. You just make sure that you cut it up in a good place. You hide the blood, hide the tools. You get rid of it in separate locations. You don't be too suspicious. Make it on your casual route that you normally take, so it doesn't look like you're going out of the way. Make sure you shut your phone off if you're going somewhere weird or you're going to be disposing of shit. And beyond that, maybe feeding their body to a crocodile. If you find a hungry croc, maybe down in Florida, a good place to do some weird shit. If you go down to Florida, do some weird shit, maybe kill someone, hide the body by feeding it to a crocodile or an alligator or something of that nature. Some trashy person looking to eat someone's face after they did a bunch of bath salts. Maybe something like that. You could find someone who might eat this body. But murder regardless. You're a great person for listening to this show. I appreciate you being here, and let's talk about further executions, including dismemberment. Dismemberment, not just beheading, but also dismembering the arms, dismembering legs, their whole entire body before actually cutting off their head. But they would also do things like cut off fingers first, cut off your hands at the wrist, move up your arms or your legs as you go. So maybe they cut off your toes and then cut off your foot at the ankle and then cut off your lower leg at the knee, and then they just move up, and you're going to end up bleeding out and dying anyway, but they might do that, and they might corset your leg or corset your tissue so you don't bleed as much or you don't bleed at all if they can get it tight enough, and then it just keeps you alive for longer. So it's either you end up dying slowly of blood loss after enough has been cut off, or maybe you end up dying from infection because you get to sit there for weeks on end, not actually dying but definitely dying. So it's horrific in a lot of different ways. There's also other ancient civilizations like ancient Egypt, ancient China, Greece, Rome, and we're going to look at each one just a tiny bit here. So in ancient Egypt, executions were reserved also for high treason, like I had mentioned. Yeah, sometimes Egyptian pharaohs granted mercy, allowing criminals... Jesus. Also, don't condone this, but if you're going to have to choose one way or the other, I guess using it, doing it yourself. But sometimes pharaohs granted mercy, allowing criminals to commit suicide instead of being, executed by the crown or by, the ruler, whoever it might be. But still, that's like your hand or my hand. It's going to end up with the same result, but I guess if I get to do it, maybe I can make it less painful or find a way that's more dignifying, or it's hard to say exactly why you'd want to do one or the other. Obviously you don't want to do either, but if you had the choice, like why? I think that's really the only thing I can think of, is that it's at your own hand. You can be more dignified in killing yourself. And you could also, make it less painful, possibly. But beyond that, let's go over to ancient China. The legalist philosophy developed by philosopher Hans Feizi, 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 from that lasted from 280 BCE to 233 BCE in the state of Qin. Qin, I think it's Qin, promoted harsh punishments, including decapitation, slicing, which is lingqi, lingqi, I'm going to say, and boiling alive. Not just burning alive, boiling alive. Put these motherfuckers in a vat, a cauldron, a big fucking pot of boiling water. Get this water 212 degrees, Dip them in from their feet first, nice and slow too. Let me give you that. Dip them in nice and fucking slow, taking a long time to let them get submerged in this water. So it's fucking painful. Very fucking painful. They're going to take their time putting you in that water, so it not only is very painful, but it kills you real slow, because really until your midsection, your core gets in there where it's going to start affecting your internal organs and causing those to overheat and fail eventually. When that stuff starts happening, and then you might start dying and actually start, getting overheated and getting to the point where your body's going to start faltering, or your brain's going to get overheated by your body temperature being 200 degrees or something, almost, where your blood's boiling pretty much. Your brain's going to get fucking boiled and end up killing you in one way or another, or turning you into a lifeless vegetable of some sort. That sounds fucking horrible. I'll tell you what. I'll tell you everything about that. Everything about the way that the legalist philosophers handled their punishments was incredibly crazy. And the other thing that was mentioned here was Ling Chi, and Ling Chi we'll talk about a little bit more coming up, but wow is it fucking horrific in a lot of different ways. And they also used public executions very, very commonly, reinforcing the emperor's divine authority. He wanted to put his power out there. He wanted people to know that he was the almighty, the most powerful, that if anyone went against him, if anyone showed a little bit of treason towards his ruling, towards his empireship, towards him being the divine ruler and authority, if anyone showed any opposition to that, they would definitely get the hand, they would get the fucking punishment. They would get some sort of incredibly harsh punishment, even for smaller things, but they would murder people, just keeping that. I mean, it's been a common thing though, in especially Chinese culture throughout history, to have the emperor really just fucking kill people for one reason or another, to do this, to help with wars, to help with just keeping them in power. Like, millions of people over throughout history have been killed, murdered, tossed to the side in China just for trying to live their lives, and for maybe ruling the wrong person, or not showing their appreciation enough, or just living in the wrong place even. It's just crazy the things that have happened throughout the world's history. But from China, let's move from China now to Greece. We're going to talk about ancient Greece and some of the weird ways that they like to do executions. It's also interesting how throughout time, even though this is, over hundreds, sometimes thousands of years in difference with these times, these places and, parts of time, like Mesopotamia was, like I said, 1754 BCE. And then we just talked about China there, which was 280, 233 BCE in that area. So that's, 1500 years, but still, it's crazy how so many executions vary throughout history and vary throughout the region or the territory that they were in the world. There's so many different ways of killing people, and it just reminds me of that old, I think it was Spike TV show, 1,000 Ways to Die, and they would just have the most absurd ways that people have apparently, I never really looked into it, but people had apparently actually died one way or another throughout history, and they made it into these little they made them into little reenactments and made them into that show that showed all these people dying in these fucking crazy ways. And that's what this reminds me of a lot. Is just like, hey, we killed them this way, we killed them that way, we did this, we did that. These, the Chinese did this, the Egyptians did this, and everyone has their own way of killing people, which is wild. But yeah, ancient Greece. So the Greeks would practice stoning, poisoning, and crucifixion. So they would do, like I said, a completely different way of doing it from, say, the Chinese there. You would have stoning, which is crushing someone to death in one way or another with stones. Sometimes stones were just piled on top of someone until they were literally crushed to death. Sometimes it was just taken and they were beaten with stones, or other times they would have a public display of this where they actually gave the entirety of the crowd, or a certain set of people in the crowd, or that were, affected by this perpetrator, that were affected by this this person, this suspect who committed these crimes, they would give them stones, and they would just throw stones at this person until the person died. And I mean, that sounds awful. It sounds terrible, just getting stones hucked at. I mean, hopefully you just get one that smacks you in the head and knocks you out real fast. And then just you don't even feel anything the rest of the time, instead of just getting pelted with stones over and over and over again. Just bones getting crushed and ligaments getting torn, and internal injuries happening, your fucking organs getting lacerated. Instead of that happening, hopefully you just get hit in the head if you're the fucking prisoner dude who's gonna be getting executed by stoning. But geez, man, that sounds awful. And from stoning, we moved to poisoning. They would do things like Socrates hemlock. They would use that, and they would poison people and let them just die a terribly painful death that killed them from the inside out. And I don't know how fast Socrates hemlock works in killing people, or how quickly it takes to poison someone, or the exact effects that it has on a body besides, causing death at the end of it. So I don't know if that would be less painful or more sought after than things like stoning or crucifixion. But it does not sound pleasant either way. Getting poisoned never sounds pleasant, because getting poisoned, to me, it always reminds me of the long haul killings that happen. A lot of the times it's women perpetrating against someone, like, say, a husband that they hate, or someone in their family, where they are poisoning them consistently and constantly for months on end, years on end sometimes, trying to slowly up their poison until they end up killing them eventually. So in Greece, though, Athens developed legal trials but still allowed brutal punishments. And Sparta was known for throwing criminals into pits. So they would throw them into pits and just let them pretty much die of dehydration or starvation or whatever might happen at the bottom of this pit. And you never know. If you had more than one criminal in one of these pits, they might just kill each other. You might get someone who eats another dude because they ended up killing them, or that dude ended up dying. And then you have cannibals who are down there, and then they're never coming out of the pit. But hey, they had a couple extra days because they ate fucking Fred over here. Fred died. John got a few extra days, so good for John, bad for Fred. You know what I'm saying? It's a very interesting and Wild Bill Hickok type of thing right there. It's definitely an interesting and Wild Bill type of thing. Buffalo Bill is, I think, what I'm going for. Buffalo Bill kind of thing. Puts the lotion on the skin, or else it gets the hose again. Type of cannibal, type of Hannibal, cannibal, fannibal, bannibal type of shit. You know what I'm saying? All right, so from there, we're going to bounce just over a tiny little bit to ancient Rome. Over in Rome, the Romans liked to do execution as a highly theatrical type of event. They often used it as entertainment in the Colosseum. Methods included crucifixion, again, where they're going to be hanging and nailing people to boards and planks and, driving spikes through them until they die, pretty much. Burning, as everyone likes to see a good body get burned. Beheading, because I don't know, it's one of those things though, like, what if you went to get some, like, Roman Colosseum crackerjack or something like that, or you were getting some popcorn or a refreshment of some sort, and they ended up doing the beheading in those 3 seconds. You're gonna miss the entire show for fucking going to get your refreshments or using the bathroom or something like that. You're gonna miss it all. So beheading's kind of lame because it's a very quick event. It's one of those things where you're like, I wonder what admission cost. I mean, they're going to be paying... No, I'm just kidding, obviously. They're not doing admission or fucking general refreshments or any shit like that. You're standing there in the goddamn heat with a ton of other people watching this stupid shit happen, watching someone get beheaded. You're not taking your eyes off that shit. You're pissing your pants right there. No one's going to care. You're in fucking ancient Europe, ancient Rome. No one's going to give a fuck. You can piss your pants right on the top of your seat right there and then sit back down, and everyone's going to be like, cool. This is good stuff right here. We're watching this guy get get executed, watch them get beheaded or whatever, and you're over here pissing your pants like a little fucking 5-year-old. Great. And then and then also throwing criminals to the wild animals, like I said before, to, as always depicted in a lot of shows and shit, to like lions and different wildcats, things of that nature. But also, maybe they would battle a bull, or they would take on some sort of crazy animal of that nature as well. They would also, though, use a punishment called pene coli or coli. Poena, pone or pona, and colai, cullei, colei, pone colai. And they would do this punishment that they had. I might be butchering that pronunciation too. I don't always do guides, and I try my best to look at words and get it. And obviously it's a Latin word, and I might have that completely wrong, but I'm gonna say pona colai. Yeah, pona colai. And that's what I'm going to stick with for that one. And this punishment included sewing criminals into a sack. So a big, burlap type of sack that they would have. And inside this sack would be a snake, a monkey, a rooster, and a dog that they would throw this dude in the sack with, so that they could all fight, and he could get attacked by all these creatures together. Rooster pecking you, dog biting you, snake digging its fangs into you, monkey tearing your fucking nutsack off, monkey biting your dick off. Whatever the monkey's doing, he's fucking you or something like that. This monkey's going crazy. The rest of them are biting you, putting venom into you, putting poison into you, taking your fucking eyes out if you're a rooster. Not good. It's not good already. And then they would take that entire sack and they would throw it in the river. They're going to drown you, and they're going to make sure that you're dead. And along with all these other animals, they definitely don't give a fuck about the animals. And they said, we're going to take this entire sack, we're going to throw it in the river, and that's how we're going to execute you. And this was mainly used for parricide, and parricide is going to be the killing of a close family member. Could be, parents, could be dad, could be mom, could be a son, so it includes a range of different ones too. So it includes, matricide, filicide, patricide, all those different things also. And could also include killing, an uncle, an aunt, just anyone in a very close lineage to you. So anyone who's in the immediate close family to you. If you killed one of those people, you might get fucking pona colai and get fucking thrown into a sack with a bunch of different animals, and then thrown into a river so you drown with all of them. Crazy fucking shit that they did back in the day. And yeah, there's just so many crazy ways that they used to execute people throughout history. And Greece was apparently brutal, extra savage. They said, fuck these people, we're gonna toss them into a sack with a bunch of animals and throw them in a river. I don't know if that's worse than getting burned alive or getting, fucking sliced or getting boiled alive. I don't know what would be worse. I mean, maybe that might be quicker in some ways, but geez. And now we're moving forward a couple hundred years. We're moving to like the medieval times, somewhere around there, 500 CE to 1500 CE, say like the 6th century to about the 16th century or so, in that area. And we're going to talk about medieval Europe. We're going to talk about Asian and African practices through this time. And we're going to also look a little bit as we move forward from there into the public spectacles that executions truly became. So in medieval Europe, there was the fall of Rome, which led to brutal localized justice among Germanic tribes. Trial by ordeal became common, where accused criminals had to survive extreme conditions. They were forced to walk on hot coals, they were thrown into rivers, and they were made to survive these different things. And if they were able to survive enough of them or something severe enough, then it would prove their innocence, is pretty much how it was, how it went. Instead of having to prove they're guilty, it was to prove their innocence. And if they were able to overcome these extreme trials and tribulations that were thrown at them, they would be found not guilty or, found innocent of this crime that they were accused of, performing in one way or another. And They would also use execution methods like decapitation, a good one we were talking about, hanging, which is a very common one, as they would use that to break a person's neck, or would, as it went a lot of the times way back in the day when hangings were first starting, they would hang someone and pretty much just leave them there to be strangled to death or be, choked to death, because they didn't really drop them like that. They just dropped the floor out from underneath of them, but they didn't have any slack in the rope, so it didn't like break their neck or break their bones or knock them out or anything of that nature. It just really had them hang there until they choked to death or were strangled to death. And then they would also break people on the wheel. Breaking on the wheel was a common one, or using the breaking wheel was a common one also, where they would use this giant wheel to break someone's, say, legs, break their arms. They may string them up, tied through the wheel, kind of, lace their arms through the spokes of this wheel, and they would tie them up like they were being crucified almost, where they were standing with their arms spread wide through this wheel. And then they would sometimes torture the person who was put on the breaking wheel. They would sometimes cut them, they would sometimes burn them, and sometimes do things like decapitate them or behead them to finish the execution off. Other times they may just leave them there, dead of the summer, dead of the winter, something of that nature. They may leave them there to succumb to the conditions outside, whether that ends up being heat stroke or dehydration, or ends up being just famine from not eating, or in the wintertime, ends up being hypothermia or dying due to freezing to death. They definitely had a way of doing it, and they were extremely brutal in the way that they performed these executions. Medieval Europe was really a place for executions that kind of delved really hard into it. They really enjoyed, throughout the years, the guillotine as it comes through. They liked the guillotine a lot, for sure. There was also Islamic, Asian, African practices. There was the Islamic caliphates. The Quran allowed executions for apostasy, murder, and treason, and methods that they used were beheading, stoning, and crucifixion, which we have talked about all of those as of now. So, some regions, like the Ottoman Empire, used strangulation by silk cords for nobles. So they're like, let's strangle them with something a little bit nicer. It's not going to hurt their neck as much, but they're still going to die. So we'll use these nice, soft, silky cords. It feels so good on my neck. It's so good on my neck. Have you ever had a silk tie or anything? Just tuck it up right on your neck. A little silk scarf, maybe? So good. So soft on my skin. And then they pulled it tighter and tighter and tighter until they died. And then, it's not so soft on your skin. Or it still is soft on your skin, but you can't feel it because you're dead. Lots of craziness. Lots of crazy stuff. Lots of crazy ways that they would just execute people throughout history, and it just blew my mind reading some of these. And the next one we're going to talk about, which I mentioned before, is a Ling Chi. Ling Chi was often used in China. It's a very Chinese torture method and execution method, and what Ling Chi translates to is death by 1,000 cuts. And let me tell you, they really implied 1,000 cuts and went with it. They love the idea of cutting you as many times as they can before you die. Just get you as cut up as fucking possible before you die. So death by 1,000 cuts was used. They would use a sharp instrument, a blade of some sort, something that was sharp but not sharp enough where it's just going to completely flay you like crazy. But they would, pretty much do that and flay people, where they would slowly start cutting them, like cut at your arm, cut at your arm, cut at your arm, and just continuously cut at your arm until they slowly dismembered you over time. So imagine someone taking like a razor blade or something and just slow cuts at your shoulder, just right at the joint on your shoulder there, just slow cuts, very precise, very exacting with their cuts. Just take as slow as possible, maybe do, a good handful in every area of your body, 20 of them or something, get a good, nice blood flow going, and then just leave you there for a little while, leave you there for a day or two, maybe you bleed out, maybe you don't, and then I'll come back and cut you another 20 times in each area. How about that? And then maybe if you do end up lasting, say, another 2 days, 4 days, maybe I'll come and do 40. Maybe I'll come and just do your arm until your arm actually comes off. And then maybe we'll tie that off and let you keep going. Maybe we'll let you keep going until your other arm comes off. And then we'll let you bleed out maybe. Or maybe we'll just end up decapitating you completely by then. We'll just pull off your head. Crazy. Crazy psycho motherfuckers. Like, who was the guy that was like, yeah, we could decapitate them, we could behead them, we could dismember them, but what if we did it slowly? What if we took our time with it? What if we just let them watch as we slowly cut off their limbs? How about that? That sounds like fun, right? That sounds like a good time. Good time for everyone. Everyone had a good time. Good time. Good time, yeah. I'm trying to... what's the fucking song? I'm gonna play it on here, I'm telling you what. Have a good time, good time, good time. I don't fucking know what I'm talking about. There's a song, though. There is a song that I'm thinking of. And I just can't think of what the fucking melody or the words are. But there's a song, I'm telling you. I'm fucking telling you. China also used... This was Asian, China, might have been India. So India, China areas, in Asia in particular, though. There was execution by elephant, or gunga rao. Gunga rao was a method of capital punishment in South and Southeast Asia, particularly in India, where Asian elephants were used to crush, dismember, or torture captives during public executions. The animals were trained to kill victims immediately or to torture them slowly over a prolonged period. So you're like, all right, Dumbo, get out there. We're gonna slow. And he's like, all right, boss, I got it. Slow. Instead of going out there and immediately stepping on this dude's head, he's like, I'm gonna step on your legs, step on your arms, step on your torso a tiny bit. Just crush your ribs, and then I'll step on your head. Most commonly employed by royalty, the elephants were used to signify both the ruler's power of life and death over his subjects and his ability to control the wild animals. So he's like, look, I can control this elephant and tell him to kill you, and guess what? You're going to get killed, and you're not going to be able to do shit about it because I fucking rule you. I am all powerful. I have fucking power over life and death, and you can't control what I'm fucking doing. And you can't stop me from doing it. And your treasonous ass is going to get fucking murdered right now. And I'm going to kill you and execute you and get you the fuck out of this kingdom. So they would, use elephants sometimes to do that, which is wild to me. Like I've already mentioned, though, beyond that, they also used beheading, and beheading was very common. It was probably the preferred method for most common criminals that were, sentenced to execution in one way or another. It was quick, it was efficient, it didn't take a lot of time, it didn't cost a lot of money. They could perform a public spectacle if they wanted to show the public of what could happen to them if they were also treasonous or something of that nature. It was a way to display their power and their rule over everyone without having to really put together an entire fucking show or get a handler or, teach an elephant how to fucking murder someone fast or slow. They didn't have to do that. So beheading was very common and continues to be a common occurrence throughout history and the history of executions. And so we'll continue venturing forward, and we'll go, a little bit further ahead in time, coming closer to where we're at from like the 12th century to about, say, the 18th century. In that like 600-year period around there, public beheadings, hangings, and burning at the stake became very common. They were often used in traitors, treasonous people. That was the most common throughout history reason that people really got killed was being treasonous. But also things like witches and heretics were burned alive. And this was, very common through the 1600s, the 1700s. There was a lot of different reasons for doing this. But during times like, say, the Spanish Inquisition from 1478 through, quite a few hundred years after that, the Inquisition executed people for heresy and often used garroting, which was strangulation, or burning. But yeah, garroting's like oftentimes when you think of, or if you look at like a garrote, it's usually like a thin cord that has handles on both ends that you can wrap around someone's neck. And sometimes, if it's good enough, or it's sharp enough line, or it's good enough line, like you could take someone's head off pretty much with that shit. But they would garrote people, or they would burn them alive, or slowly burn them over time, causing more pain and torture throughout the entirety of the situation. torture was widely used before execution. You got to show people that it's not just, hey, you're going to get executed, you are also going to get tortured. So really think about what you're doing and don't be treasonous, don't commit crimes, don't kill other people, because you will get killed yourself and it will be horrific. It will be horrible. You will get fucking tortured immensely before you get executed. Nobles were often beheaded due to its quickness and, respect almost in some way, where they didn't torture the body. They didn't do anything crazy with it. They beheaded you quickly. You were dead fast. They could clear you out. They didn't have to make a whole spectacle of it. But sometimes they did. You never know. Sometimes they had to make a spectacle over the overthrow of a ruler who did not belong where they were at. And they were taking advantage of their power. They were killing people who were innocent, whatever it may have been. There was definitely times where they had to throw nobility into a beheading, into a torture scenario where they were publicly displayed for torture to show people that, hey, we're not going to take this kind of horseshit anymore either. We're not going to deal with a ruler that treats its people the way it's been treated. Commoners were often hanged, drawn, and quartered. So people would be hanged, which was, like I said, strangled usually, or sometimes, if they actually started developing it, as they started developing it, they actually started, breaking people's necks by dropping them from the gallows, and they would have the dropout where they actually fell a good 4 feet or whatever it might have been to actually snap their neck. They would be drawn and quartered, though, and that's different. Sometimes from what I always have heard about drawn and quartering, it's using like horses, where they would have horses and they would tie this person. Sometimes it's just, the arms together and the legs together, so it's 2 horses pulling in opposite directions. Or sometimes you would have 4 horses, where it's 1 on each arm and then 1 on each leg. So you have 4 there that would pull in completely opposite directions. Your right arm, your left leg are getting pulled in opposite directions. Your right leg, your left arm are getting pulled in opposite directions. Everything's completely opposite of each other, though, and you're going to end up getting torn apart, literally torn apart, where your arms are going to come off, your legs are going to come off, something will happen, and you're going to fucking bleed out, and it's going to be torturous. I'll tell you what, it's going to be not good for you or for anyone watching. Maybe for someone watching. They might love that shit. I mean, I'm sure back in the day when it was a more common spectacle to be seen, people would go down and watch it and, like, cheer that shit on. Like, I mean, obviously in Rome they did. They would have whole showings in the Colosseum to see these people get killed in one way or another. It's what they came there for, was to watch these people get executed or get killed or fight some crazy wild animal that hopefully will murder them at the end of the day. Like, it's the whole reason that people came down to watch these things. And from there, we're going to talk, like I said, Europe really gets into the execution, and they really get into showing people that, like, traitors are not going to be tolerated, and they're going to develop a use of the guillotine quite often. They're going to definitely use different methods of torture throughout this time, from about 200 to 500 years ago, from 1500 to 1800. And we're going to talk a little bit, like I said, about hanging, quartering, and drawing. And this was used for traitors, involving hanging until near death, castration, so we're going to get some cut your balls off, which I'm guessing was used for, like, rapists, maybe? I mean, are you going to... maybe murderers too, like, you're gonna just castrate some dude because he stole some shit or was treasonous? It seems a little harsh, but everything was kind of harsh back in the day. Disembowelment, they're gonna cut open your stomach and let your intestines and, organs fall out of your body, and that's how you're gonna end up dying, is you're going to be completely disemboweled, and you're gonna either bleed to death or your organs are gonna end up shutting down because they're fucking exposed to God knows what is in the air. And maybe they would take those organs and start cutting those away from you. So maybe your organs are going to be disconnected and you're going to end up fucking dying quickly, or maybe quickly. I wonder how long. I'll have to look it up, because I'm very curious now how long after being disemboweled you could actually stay alive. Because I feel like it would be quick, but I mean, if everything is still attached technically, even though it's exposed to the outside air and outside your body, even if your intestines may have fallen out of your body, if they're still attached properly somehow, could you live for quite a while? I mean, I feel like you could. I feel like nowadays, like if that shit happened, you could go to a hospital if someone, was to find you and take you to a hospital, and you could actually probably get that shit put back inside of you and rearranged and sewn back up and live on with your life, which is crazy to think about. And then they would also use dismemberment, which they've done through the entirety of history, and this would last until about the 19th century, so a little bit past 1800 into the 1800s. And yeah, that's crazy. They would use all these different methods: castration, disembowelment, drawing and quartering, just hanging people. Come on, I mean, crazy. But truly developing things, they loved the guillotine. Guillotine was chef's kiss of able to execute people. It was so fast, so efficient, one of the most quote-unquote humane ways of doing it. So if they were looking to not torture someone and just get an execution out of the way, they were just like, we have, so many people we need to execute. We need to execute all these prisoners of war, all these traitors, all these treasonous people, whoever it might be. They're like, let's get it going. We have 300 something people to rock through. Let's get chopping and just pull the blade up, set someone's head there, let it go, drop it. Pull the blade up, set someone's head there, let it go, drop it. It's the good old fucking drop and chop. I'm telling you what, the guillotine was made for execution incredibly well. It was created for humane execution during the French Revolution and was used to execute. It was also used to execute King Louis XVI and thousands during the Reign of Terror. And this was part of the French Revolution there. The Reign of Terror was, just a little section of that. I would really like to cover the French Revolution, or maybe a couple of different revolutions throughout the world during an episode. I think it would be good to kind of break them down here or there and talk a little bit about the military might of these different regions throughout the world and the way that they really did things like handle battles or handle an overthrow or handle, treasonous people, or, just how things developed in these countries during these times, or, how they even regressed in some way where they weren't able to develop the way that they should have been, and how they limited the development of these countries by having these wars or these revolutions. I think it's very incredibly interesting, and I think it's a good topic to tackle down the line. Is I'm really trying to focus, I would say, more on history with this podcast than true crime, or than just like, I'm not the funniest person in the world, but I try to keep it lighthearted and try to not make it too serious in one way or another. But we talk about serious stuff, and I like to, be serious at times and keep it light like that. Keep it lighthearted when I can. So keep it lighthearted when I can, keep it kind of funny and comedic when I can, and then also tackle some true crime, and then focus mainly on doing history as the main focus of this podcast. So giving you historical facts, presenting them in a way that's interesting, melding together my knowledge and my interest with being able to present this to you all in an intriguing way that keeps you coming back every week is a lot of fun. And I appreciate you being here, and we're going to continue, tackling the history of things. And let's continue forward right now with the history of executions, and we're going to talk about burning more people, burning of witches. Burning these witches. As most people know, there was the Salem witch trials in the late 1600s in the United States, in Salem, Massachusetts, or around the Salem, Massachusetts area. And it's cool. It's a cool place to go to if you've never been there. Check it out during Halloween time. It does get crazy, crazy busy on Halloween, or right in that general area. The day before, the day, of type of thing. But awesome place, cool place to go to, cool place to check out. It was a lot of fun to go there a few years ago, about four years ago at this point. Went out there, and I think it was 2021, late 2021, to check out Halloween for that time. And then went to New York City after that, and went to Niagara Falls to finish that trip off. But cool place to check out. But there was also the burning of the witches there. Tens of thousands of women, mostly women, were burned alive across Europe, and then it trickled over into the United States also during this time, and people were accused of being witches when they weren't. And if you had more than one reputable witness to crimes, or witness to, witch acts, or something particular that happened that this person did that was very mysterious, or like, how did this happen, or how did they predict this? You could accuse them of being a witch, and they'd probably get killed in one way or another. A lot of people were executed for being witches, even though there was definitely, obviously, no way that they were a fucking witch. So, pretty stupid, but pretty intriguing, very interesting, very entertaining in a kind of a macabre way, where people are getting killed, but it's such a weird reason for them getting killed that you're like, let's look into this more. There's been thousands of books and movies and TV shows and different pieces of media that talk about these things that had happened, and it's real history, and it's just one of those pieces of history that's hard to understand looking at it now, but back then it was commonplace. It was commonplace for people to have these beliefs, and being such a religious time, and religion's always been a big part of the United States history, but being such a big part of it, there was it was not so hard for people to believe that there was people out there with some sort of magical witch-like demonic powers that were overtaking them, and that caused them to do terrible things, or caused them to make a man be an adulterer, or cause them to kill someone, whatever it might be, some crazy shit like that they force this by using their magical potions or magical powers or whatever it might be to happen. Just absurd to think about, but like I said, interesting, intriguing, and entertaining in a lot of weird ways. And moving forward from that, we're going to say there was a big decline coming into the 1800s of public executions and of executions overall, though punishments were often still, executions were often still included in punishments. And, punishments for serious crimes such as murders, such as treason, such as rapes, and things of that nature were definitely still instilled and still imparted on people who deserve them. And criminals who were convicted of these different crimes were definitely still punished accordingly. And it brings us forward, out of public executions, out of executions for less serious things, and more into a moved behind closed door type of scenario where they did it for punishments and didn't let the public see. They didn't make a spectacle out of it. They didn't let children and their families and everyone come and see this person die. They might have had a couple of scientists, or maybe one or two people from the public, or something of that nature, kind of like they do now, but they really moved it away from being in the public eye. So executions moved behind closed doors to reduce the public spectacle. Methods became more scientific and efficient. Hanging improved with the long drop. They used an even longer drop method to ensure instant death. Firing squads were common when military executions were involved, or executions were involved in military operations. And the electric chair was introduced in the United States in the 1890s, or 1890 exact, possibly. Late 1800s, though, the electric chair was introduced in the United States, and they would be using that to kill a lot of people for quite some time. And even like over 100 years, they would use that. And don't get me wrong, there was still other practices that were undertaken. They definitely used other methods as well, but the electric chair became a huge piece of execution in the United States at that time. And yeah, with the electric chair coming in, it kind of brings us into more modern execution practices from, say, 1900 to present day. And this included a whole variety of executions, but things that were more painless, things that were more ethical in a lot of ways, that they would use throughout the next, 100 plus years up until now. They would use the electric chair, but they also used firing squads, hangings, as they did for a long time, and also things like gas chambers to kill a lot of different people. Stalin's regime would use gunshot executions, especially to the back of the head. These KGB executions were swift and secretive, and they would, do it to a lot of different people: traitors, treasonous people, prisoners of war, a whole variety of different individuals, people who just talked bad about the KGB or about, Russia there. They would get killed. Russia's a place where you don't fuck around too much with saying the wrong shit, because they will come and they will find you. They will find your ass, and when they find your ass, no one's gonna see you ever again. I'll tell you what. Or they're gonna just find your body floating in the fucking river or something, like it's goddamn Italian mobsters. Also, the Japanese Imperial Army would use beheadings and forced starvation on their prisoners of war during this time, but in reality, there's not a whole lot of development in execution methods, especially since they're leaning away from executing as many people and they're trying to make it more humane and more ethical in a lot of ways. Executions definitely started to taper down during this time, at least, punishments for crimes and executions used for punishment of crimes. Other executions, there was unfortunate, terrible executions and purges of cultures that took place throughout history and throughout this time. There was the Holocaust that happened that killed over 6 million Jews and other people that happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or happened to be, the wrong hair color, the wrong eye color, that happened to be practicing the wrong religion at the time, quote unquote wrong. None of this is wrong, but they were viewed as being wrong at that time. And they were executed. They were taken to gas chambers. They were, killed in mass firing squads. There were so many different executions that took place throughout history. And that was, obviously a huge example of one of the completely inhumane and unethical versions of execution that did take place. There was so many different accounts of things like that happening throughout history, but that was obviously, like I just said, a massive and the largest that I believe I've ever heard of example of an execution that took place throughout history. And from that terrible mention, from that terrible set of executions that did take place, we are going to move forward just a little bit more towards more humane executions and towards more humane punishments for those who did commit crimes, for those who did deserve to be executed, for those who did deserve punishment. We are going to talk about humane methods that were finally developed to execute these people, or how humane and ethical treatments kind of came into being put in place for executions. We're going to look at what they did and what they used as alternatives for some of this. And it's not complete alternatives, because there were countries like North Korea and China and the United States that stuck with firing squads as one of their options, or, as maybe their main option still. The United States still uses it technically. In Utah in 2010 or so, there was a firing squad execution, and actually just recently, I believe it was this year in 2025, there was a gentleman in I'd have to look up the article, South Carolina maybe, but he was convicted quite a while ago, and he had chose firing squad as his method of execution, and he was just killed recently by firing squad in the last month or so here. And I was surprised to hear about it, because I didn't realize any states were still practicing it, but there are a handful of states who still have it listed as one of their methods, and if a prisoner chooses, they can have that as their method of execution. But most countries have abolished the death penalty at this point. Not many of them really practice it still, and even in the United States, it varies state by state. Even there are plenty of states who have death penalties and executions in their law as being legal, but they don't practice it at all. Like, I believe it's California. It's technically on the books, but it's not practiced at all. It hasn't been practiced in years, and I don't think it's something that they're going to get back to practicing, really. And it's one of those things where it's a legal, morality and ethical scenario that comes up, where it's, unless there's super proven 1,000,000% facts, this person admitted it, lines up completely with what happened, they are definitely the person who did it. There is so much questioning and uncertainty about some of these crimes and about some of these people who have been put on death row as to whether they deserve to die, whether they were even truly guilty of the crime that they were accused of, things of that nature, where it's so uncertain that killing someone sometimes does not seem ethical and does not seem like the right practice to perform at that time. But the U.S. would introduce The U.S. would introduce lethal injection in 1982 as a painless, quote-unquote painless, because tell you what, we've talked about it a couple times before, it's not always painless, but a painless alternative to other execution methods, and they would still use this. They still use this up to current day. It's probably the most common method of execution used today would be lethal injection, and it's, they kind of similar to putting a dog down. They put one in where it knocks them out. They put another one in that stops their heart. And then they, put one in that completely shuts down their system or whatever it might be. And that's just how they got to do it. And sometimes it does not work like that. Sometimes it doesn't really affect them the way they expect it to. And it gets to be kind of a horrific show for the people who do watch in the viewing section. If there are people allowed in the viewing section for that execution. But yeah, there are still plenty of countries that use execution methods and still execute prisoners as of 2025 here. China, they have the most executions for prisoners worldwide every year. Generally, average speaking, they execute the most people out of any country in the world yearly. Then there's Iran. They do have public hangings for drug offenses, blasphemy for homosexuality, which is just absurd in so many different ways. You don't allow a person to be who they naturally are as they're born, and you're saying that's a fucking problem, and you're going to kill them for it? Kill them because they are practicing something that comes as instinctually to them as, breathing, or as, to me, like hooking up with my girlfriend, something like that. As something as simple that comes to them is hooking up with someone of the same sex, and you're going to punish them for that. That's completely absurd to me. That's crazy. But is unfortunately practiced in parts of the world, and it's just absurd to think about that. Saudi Arabia has beheadings and crucifixions for severe crimes, so they still crucify people, they still behead people for severe crimes, and their definition of severe crimes might not be the same as it is here in the United States, but in general, I'm guessing it's more, murders and adultery and, drug crimes, things of that nature, because they really don't look positively, especially on things like drugs over there. And then the United States, they have lethal injection, they have the electric chair, which is rarely used, but is used, and then they have the firing squad, as I had mentioned, which once again is rarely used, but is still in circulation and is used in some states here. With that, there are a ton of states, of countries, of different places throughout the world who have abolished the death penalty entirely. So over 100 plus countries have abolished the capital punishment of their prisoners. They abolished execution of their prisoners quite a long time ago in some of those scenarios. And yeah, over half of the world does not allow for capital punishment or for executions of their prisoners, or for those, who have committed crimes in one way or another. And actually, the European Union bans executions entirely. So if there are countries that are part of the European Union, the EU, they are now not even allowed to execute people because the European Union completely bans executions in their entirety, which is kind of cool to think about. There are so many people, like I said, that are falsely accused or wrongly found guilty that it's hard to say all executions are justified. I would say that a lot of them are. Maybe it's 50-50. It's hard to say exactly, but even some of the people that get killed that are proven guilty, sometimes I don't know if they deserve to be killed. Horrific crimes against children, multiple murders, things that are proven 100%, Sure, we can kill a lot of those fucking people. Get them off the face of this earth. Don't take up more air. Don't take up more food. Don't take up more money. Just get them out of here. Get them fucking away from everyone. But there are so many people out there who are maybe guilty, maybe not guilty, that it's hard to say using the death penalty is the way to go. And so the history of execution is a reflection of human justice, brutality, and innovation throughout time. While some methods aimed for quick, humane deaths, others were designed completely for maximum suffering and maximum torture. Today, the debate over the morality of death continues. The death penalty, the morality, the ethicality, is ethicality a word? The ethicality, the ethical nature of the death penalty, the morality of the death penalty, the debate still continues today. And with that, we are going to wrap up. We are going to wrap up our section here on executions, and we're going to stop the suffering. We're going to stop the suffering. We're going to end the life of this execution section, and we're going to look into beliefs in the afterlife. All right, and so the belief in the afterlife is one of the oldest and most enduring aspects of human culture, appearing in nearly every civilization throughout history. So there's always been the belief in the afterlife, one way or another. These beliefs have evolved, influenced by religious, philosophical, and cultural developments. And we will talk about a comprehensive history of afterlife beliefs from prehistoric times to modern interpretations. So, like I said before, with executions, we're going to start quite a long time ago, thousands of years into BCE, and we're going to venture all the way from there, coming all the way back up and around to present day, up into the 2000s, up until 2025, and kind of what people believe and different views in the world and different ways people have viewed the afterlife throughout history and throughout different cultures and throughout different regions of the world. So to start heading way, 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 way back, just keep going. No, you haven't gone far enough. Keep, go. All right, cool. All right, I think we're almost there. So way, way before 3000 BCE, where we started with executions up top, we are going to go to somewhere between 10,000 and 100,000 BCE, so quite a long time after that. Some of the earliest burials, such as those found in Shanidar Cave in Iraq, suggest early ritualistic burials. Graves often contained tools, food, and weapons, hinting at a belief in life after death. And then there was also things that included animals, So there was animism and ancestral worships, where early humans liked to practice animism, believing in spirits that inhabited the natural world. Some hunter-gatherer societies believed that dead spirits would Some hunter-gatherer societies believed the dead became spirits who could influence the living world and could actually come back or could, help with the crops or help with the hunts or help with the weather or help in one way or another. You could pray to them. They could help you develop things in your life. They could help you find a spouse. They could do so many different things. There was pretty much a spirit for everything. There was a spirit that guided the bird to help you understand the calling of nature. There's so many different beliefs throughout time, especially involving animals and spirits and people who became either a spirit or an animal, or maybe a spirit within an animal after their life, after they died. And these spirits could influence the living, and this was really developed throughout time, is still used a lot today and still kind of is infused in a lot of the afterlife type of beliefs, infused in some of the afterlife type of beliefs today, such as, reincarnation and things of that nature. And from those beliefs, we're going to move, forward a little bit in time. We're going to ancient Mesopotamia again, like the Epic of Gilgamesh in 2100 BCE or right around there, which described a grim afterlife where all souls, regardless of their deeds, entered the dark and dusty underworld. The underworld, called the House of Dust, or Urkala, Irkalla, I believe it's Urkala, was ruled by the goddess Ereshkigal, where souls existed as ghostly shadows. Ereshkigal, Ereshkigal, Ereshkigal. I think I am butchering that. I am probably destroying that name. I'm going to have to look that one up. Didn't look that one up. The goddess Ereshkigal. Yeah. Ereshkigal. That's a good one. But they would go into the underworld. There would be this goddess there where the souls existed as ghostly shadows. She would be ruling this underworld. And in the Epic of Gilgamesh, that's where all souls went to after death. They would go and have their afterlife in this underworld, this crazy, weird, ghostly place down there. And the ancient Egyptians, they had plenty of afterlife beliefs as well. They had a balance in judgment belief, where a person's soul or their ka was judged by Osiris in the Hall of Truth. The weighing of the heart was weighed against the feather of Mat, and so Mat was this balance and judgment. They would have this heart that was weighed against the feather of Mat, and if it was lighter, the soul would enter Aru. Aru was the field of reeds, which was a paradise, and if it was heavier, the soul would be devoured by Amit, or Amit, and would be devoured by this creature, this crocodile, lion, hippo, beast mashup culmination that would, devour souls who had heavier heart weights than the feather of Mat there. So crazy, wild beliefs which helped you pass through the afterlife and, reigned you from one god to another and put you up against different scenarios where if you didn't overcome, or your physical nature was not enough, or your heart didn't weigh enough, or was too heavy, it could be devoured by a creature and you would not pass into the afterlife, into this paradise. Just crazy. Some of the beliefs that are out there are wild to me. Even, I've never been a super religious person, and I'd like to believe that we go somewhere after death, but in reality, it's not my true beliefs, I would say. But there's plenty of ways that people have celebrated or practiced their afterlife beliefs throughout history that are very, very wild, that are very, fascinating and intriguing and interesting in a lot of different ways. The Egyptians would also obviously mummify and tomb their loved ones, or their royalty. Nobility in particular were mummified and put into tombs, and this would ensure safe passage into the afterlife. The higher in nobility you were, the larger the tomb you got, and that's why they sometimes find these tombs out there that are gigantic and are filled with rooms and rooms full of jewels and treasures and this and that. Stuff for this person to take into the afterlife. All of these different pieces were things that they could take with them into the afterlife and would ensure a safe passage for them into the afterlife. And we're going to move now from ancient Egypt over to Greece and Rome. We're going to talk about some of the ways that they practice their afterlife beliefs. We're kind of sticking with the same general areas that we looked at for executions, the areas of the world, and we're going to look at those areas for the most part for the afterlife as well. And kind of, you can compare, contrast, see how they practice their executions, and see how also they, believed and ritualized the afterlife in some effects in some of these ways, how they practiced their I want to say transportation, but their journey into the afterlife. So in Greece, they had the underworld, which was Hades. Souls traveled across the river Styx, ferried by Charon, or Charon. I think it's Charon. It's Charon, Charon. The underworld had Elysium for heroes, and Asphodel Meadows for ordinary souls. Asphodel Meadows for ordinary souls. And Tartarus, or Tartarus, 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 for the damned. Tartarus. For the damned, though. Those damned souls would go to Tartarus. And there was also Roman adaptations of these gods, which they had a similar god-type system where there was gods and spirits and, people for all these individual aspects of life that they looked over them, and when they finally passed, they would accompany them in the afterlife and in the underworld and in these different places, and they would help them venture from their death into the afterlife. They would help them get there. And these adopted Greek beliefs would include perjury and divine rewards in the Roman adaptation. In the Roman adaptation of these different beliefs, these different afterlife beliefs, for the Romans, they would also include purgatory, which is like, you're stuck there. You're not in heaven or hell. You're not in the underworld or in, paradise. You're kind of just, you're stuck somewhere. They would also use divine rewards, which would reward a person for being, so good in life, or for doing this in life, or for doing this coming into the afterlife. So the Greeks and the Romans had similar views, similar visions in what they believed would happen in the afterlife, or how they kind of ventured into the afterlife. They had a lot of similar gods. They were different names, but they had a lot of similarities between these gods that they did have. And like I said, the Roman adaptation of a lot of these beliefs from Greece included purgatory and included some divine rewards and things of that nature also. And from there, we're going to venture just a little bit further east, and we're going to go to India. We're going to look at some Hindu and Buddhist afterlife beliefs. So Hinduism, they believe in reincarnation or samsara, and samsara was based on karma. So if you were able to get your karma up throughout your life, if you're a good Hindu and you practiced correctly, if you did the things that you were need to do within the religion, if you practice your life well, if you treated those around you properly, if you did the things that were required of you with your place in society, then you could be reincarnated. And the ultimate goal was moksha, which was liberation from rebirth. And then your cycle of reincarnation would end. When you finally reached this moksha, you would actually finally be liberated from re-entering the earth over and over again, and you'd finally find that kind of nirvana, as the Buddhists would call it, their nirvana, where you would escape from suffering, you would escape into a paradise, and you would finally live your entirety, the rest of your entirety, your soul's entirety in this paradise type place. And that's, like I was saying, they have a similar cycle with Buddhism, but Nirvana was this place of escape from suffering that they were trying to reach at the very end of it. And continuing on from there, going even further east into China, into Japan, and their afterlife beliefs, there was Taoism, where the souls join the spiritual realm, and some become immortal at that point. Some of them can come back to the earth and actually guide some of the people who are here on earth still as an immortal who can come back to the earth, and they can, watch over people and be there. And as the souls would join the spiritual realm, they would sometimes, like I said, be put into immortality, or sometimes they would just live there the rest of their soul's existence in this spiritual realm. And then there's Confucianism, which emphasized ancestral worship over the afterlife. You would worship your ancestors as they were put into the afterlife, and they would watch over you, and if you showed them enough praise throughout your life, you could descend to where they're at upon your death and join them in the afterlife. And the whole point pretty much was to reach the afterlife, to join your ancestors and to be there with your family at the end of the day. So that was it's a big part of the afterlife. I would say for a lot of people would be like, hey, I hope there is an afterlife so I can see these members of my family again one day. I can see their souls one day. I can be there with them in some sort of spirit realm, and I can accompany them and they can accompany me. I can maybe meet some of them that I never met before their death. There's so many different aspects that people want that include family ties and ancestry, that include the afterlife being real. There's Shinto in Japan, where they believed spirits called kami guided and protected their descendants, and they would guide them into the afterlife. And this, repeated cycle where you would have someone die, they would guide the next generation down, and they would guide them through life and protect them as they came into the afterlife after their deaths. Okay, so to this point, we have looked at a variety of afterlife beliefs ranging from way, way back in the prehistoric era, where they had beliefs that involved animism and ancestral worship. And now we're going to move forward. As we have moved forward, we looked at ancient Egyptian afterlife beliefs, we looked at the Epic of Gilgamesh, and we're now moving into medieval times and looking at medieval afterlife beliefs. We're going to start with Christian concepts of heaven, hell, and purgatory. In early Christianity, it was believed that resurrection, judgment, and eternal life would either happen in heaven or hell. And really, it's, you get judged, and you're sent to, either heaven or hell as your final place of being. So, and then purgatory was introduced as a temporary place for souls to atone before entering heaven. So if you didn't take the time to repent your sins, if you didn't, appease yourself with God and really make things right before you ended up passing away, you would go to purgatory so you could actually have that temporary placement to atone for your sins, to get to the proper place with, with God, with Jesus, before you actually entered heaven there. And then there was Dante's Inferno. Dante's Inferno depicted detailed punishment for sinners, like burning in hell for the rest of eternity, like damnation, like being shoved through a fucking who knows what. But there was always something in the seven layers of hell down there that were Dante's Inferno. And there's always something, though. There's always something, whether you're going to heaven, to paradise, you're going to hell to burn for the rest of eternity. There's always something. There's something for everyone. Or, you might end up in purgatory and just have to atone, or, try to atone, and maybe you'll get stuck there in fucking limbo for the rest of your life. You never know. From there, we're moving to Islamic afterlife beliefs. There's the Day of Judgment, which is the Qiyamah. I'm going to say it's Qiyamah, Qiyamah, where all souls are judged by Allah. And then there's paradise, which is Jannah, and that's described as a lush, beautiful garden, which is obviously where you are trying and aspiring to head to once you pass on, and once you move into the afterlife. You're looking to go to this paradise, to this Jannah, to be able to enjoy these lush, beautiful gardens with all the other people who are, great, wonderful people like yourself. So, and then, of course, along with paradise, which is kind of like their heaven, there is also a hell, which is Jahannam, which is what I'm going to say. It's Jahannam. Jahannam, a place of fire for those who reject God's teaching. So if you don't bring God into your life, if you don't accept God's teachings into your life, I'm pretty sure even if you repent for your sins, if you don't actually accept his teachings into your life, you are going to be headed to hell. And that's just one of those things that you really can't get past. You can't stop from happening if you don't bring God and bring God's teachings into your life as part of the Islamic, religion. You're not going to be able to see God if you don't accept his teachings into your life. You are going to be placed in hell, in Jahannam, and really, tortured for the rest of your life because you did not accept those teachings. And then there's things like the Viking afterlife in Norse mythology, where you have Valhalla, where warriors slain in battle were taken by Valkyries to Odin's Great Hall. And there's, Odin's Great Hall there with Valhalla. There's Helheim, which is a cold, shadowy realm for those who died of old age or sickness. So if you didn't go out in battle, if you didn't go out, with some dignity like that, if you just, rotted out or became sick and died, apparently you'd be sent to Helheim, which sounds awful. And I don't understand why, if you get sick or something, or if you die of old age and die a respectful way, you were able to make it all that way and not get killed or murdered or, shot or stabbed or whatever was happening back in the day, trampled by some Loch Ness type monster. If you didn't have any of those things happen to you, why would you get sent to a shadowy, cold realm just because you died of old age? I don't really understand that, but hey, it's what their beliefs were when it came to the afterlife. You really had to die with that dignity, that respect. You had to go out in battle, showing that you're a fierce warrior, and you'd be, put into Odin's Great Hall. You might go to Valhalla after that. So, but if you died of old age, you're going to fucking Helheim, and you're gonna not enjoy it. It's gonna be cold and shadowy, dark and gross. Sounds terrible. And then there was a renaissance to enlightenment that came closer to our time, 1500 to 1800 or so, a few hundred years ago. Scientific discoveries challenged religious concepts, but belief in the afterlife persisted, continuously. Some thinkers embraced the idea of communicating with the living. Spirits came through. They could communicate with those spirits that were kind of like ghosts in some way. They came back. They were able to communicate with those spirits, the living, the dead, able to kind of coexist in some way where the dead could guide you, or you could talk with the dead and maybe they could give you some sort of direction or response in some way where you were able to really kind of wrap your head around them being gone, but also have them still there with you. And then as you move forward from the 1800s, from 1800 into the 19th century there, into the 20th century, you get some more modern views coming along, which makes a lot of sense since we're moving towards our modern time right now. And then you have things like near-death experiences that are being reported on more and more often, since there is more reporting being done in the way of, newspapers, and as it comes into the 20th century, radio, broadcasts, and then there's television that does come up eventually. All these different ways of doing reporting, of showing the news. There are so many new and interesting and entertaining and intriguing reports of these near-death experiences that come to light. There was reports of, tunnels of lights, of life reviews, people seeing their whole life flash behind them, these tunnels of light where there's a bright light at the end, whole lot of different things that do happen that people report all the time when they have these near-death experiences. Also, as modern times came to be, reincarnation studies kind of sprouted and grew bigger and grew into more of a serious obligation for some researchers. And some researchers investigated cases of past life memories. And, there was these people who had full visions, who had full memories of these past lives that they lived. They had names, they had places, they had events that had happened in some of these cases. And these people were, could they be believed? And there was a lot of studies and research done into some of these people's stories. How accurate were they? Did they line up with something that actually happened? Did the people that they talked about, or the characters or the objects that they talked about, actually existed? Were they found where they should be found? Were they located where they were said to be located? Did the things that they believed happened actually happen at some point with another person, with this other person's life, with someone of the name that they're giving them? There's so many different pieces to these puzzles that come with these near-death experiences, and it's hard to say exactly what that means, though, because, even if it's a near-death experience, they aren't dying in the sense of never coming back. They are dying in a sense of, hey, your heart might stop, your brain might cease function for a second or something of that nature, but you're not dying to the extent where, hey, no heartbeat, no brain activity today, tomorrow, no heartbeat, no brain activity, cool, dead, for sure dead, and then coming back. Like, to the point where it's like, no fucking way they are coming back. No one's going to ever make it to that point, so we don't truly know what happens in death experiences. We know what happens in near-death experiences, which is an interesting way to look at it, There's certain chemicals and certain brain functions that happen when someone is passing away, when someone is close to death like that, where chemicals are released. You have your dimethyltryptamine or whatever, DMT, that is released. You have serotonin that's released. You have dopamine that's released. You have all these different chemicals that are released, especially when someone is close to death, very close to death. When their body knows that, when their brain knows that, it starts to release these chemicals, which can cause some hallucinations in some aspects, can cause visions in some aspects, and can cause someone to maybe see something that isn't actually there, maybe see something that is more of a memory to them, but comes through as something that is happening in the present. So maybe you have a memory of, like, your mother, and maybe she's coming and talking to you and telling you you can't go, or something of that nature, that's a very specific example because it's what happened, just happened with my grandfather who passed away. And my last time seeing him in the hospital, my dad and I were chatting with him, and my grandpa was talking about how he was talking with his mother. So my great grandmother, he said he was talking with his mother about how he wanted to go somewhere, and his mother said that he couldn't go somewhere, which was very peculiar. And it's very like, is she telling you that you're not able to move on yet, or is she telling you that you can't go until you see certain people? How were you talking to her? Where were you talking to her? When were you talking to her? We were trying to ask him so many questions to really understand where he was coming at with that, and it was hard to say. And as I was walking with my dad out of the hospital, and obviously I didn't know this was the last time I'd see my grandpa alive, but as I was walking with him out of the hospital, my dad had mentioned maybe he was wondering, he was curious if maybe my grandpa was seeing these people and talking with these people that have already passed on, because he was very close to death himself. And it's a possibility, I mean, or it's something that there was so many chemicals and drugs and different things being pumped into him at the hospital that maybe he's not sleeping very well. There's so many different aspects that maybe are causing him to hallucinate or see things, or maybe his brain was just starting to go to such an extent that even talking with like certain people at the hospital, it reminded him of his mother, and maybe they were telling him, because he was very out of it in the last couple of days. He had to be restrained due to his aggressive nature at times. He really wanted to leave the hospital, and it was hard to see, but he was kidney failure. He was starting to get dialysis. He really needed the help and the medicine that they could offer, and he didn't really understand that towards the end. He wanted to be out of the hospital. He wanted to go back home, and I wish we could have given him the comfort of that, but obviously we didn't know he was as close to death as he ended up being. So that was a hard thing to do. That was a hard thing to persist with, but he definitely was, talking with people who are not here on this earth anymore, which was very peculiar to see. And it kind of, it broadened my thoughts and my horizons when it came to picturing afterlife or picturing near-death experiences and what they could bring to the table for people, whether that's comfortability, or some sort of release from this life, whether that made him comfortable to talk to his mother, or whether that brought him to a spot where he was okay with leaving, this earth to go to another one. It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. It's really hard to understand exactly what NDEs, near-death experiences, do for people. And so there's been research into these past life memories, research into these NDEs, and then there are also, some people that just believe in oblivion rather than afterlife, where this is, it says atheistic views, but it's really just a view that if you don't believe in heaven or hell, then maybe you just believe in oblivion, where we really don't have anything after this life, where we really are here until we die, and then our body's just a rotting corpse and our soul is gone into oblivion, into the nowhere land, and we're just gone forever, and our soul dies along with our body, and we're gone from this world. We're done completely. So now you get into present day beliefs. Many believe in personal interpretations of the afterlife. There are different religious views, there's different personal views, there's different personal experiences that happen that lead you in one way or another to believe this or that. Maybe to believe, say, hey, like, I will be reincarnated. Hey, I just want to believe it because I want to see my family members again, that maybe there's an afterlife that I will see them all again in. And then even now there's such things as virtual immortality, where you can actually transfer your consciousness to like a digital aspect, or there's a digital afterlife where you could almost AI yourself or record yourself or create such a portfolio or a profile where after you passed this digital AI afterlife that you created, this digital consciousness that you created can actually continue living on in your place almost. It can still answer people, it can still talk to people, it can still respond to people. And nowadays with these voice AIs, this meta-human type of things that are happening, you can actually even create a whole persona, maybe a meta-human type deep fake person that looks exactly like you, that talks exactly like you, that has a lot of your mannerisms and your voice to it. If you did all of these things, you could actually preserve your own legacy almost in a digital immortality afterlife that could live on, forever even. It could live on until AI, until the internet is a thing of the past, which is hard to imagine. But maybe down the line, as things continue to develop with technology, even things like the internet, even things like AI could be something that is of the past, something that is like, oh, we don't even use that anymore because this is so much better, because this has become the new thing, because this connects me to someone on the exact other side of the world in point 0 seconds. Like, fucking, what I'm saying, though. It's like there's always developments happening in technology, and there's always a way to bring things even further into the future, quote unquote, and develop things even further to create even better, quicker, faster, more efficient, more proficient equipment. There's so many different things that people can do, and you can create yourself in a virtual consciousness and create a digital afterlife. And that's pretty interesting. It's pretty fascinating in a lot of ways. I don't know if that's something that I would be interested in, but it is something you can do now, and that's it's very peculiar, very peculiar. So from ghostly underworlds to reincarnation to eternal paradise and purgatory, the concept of the afterlife has shaped cultures, laws, and morality throughout history. Even today, it remains a mystery, though, one that continues to fascinate and comfort humanity in numerous ways. And we're going to get out of afterlife beliefs. We're going to get out of here. We've talked about some near-death experiences. We've talked about reincarnation. We've talked about animism. We've talked about Viking afterlife beliefs with Valhalla and Helheim. We've talked about heaven and hell and purgatory. We've talked about Hindu reincarnation. We've talked about Buddhism, where they're trying to get to nirvana. And little fun fact, Nirvana, the band, actually got the name from Kurt Cobain practicing Buddhism for just a little bit, and he learned about the concept of nirvana and ended up naming his band after that. And we've also talked about ancient Egyptian beliefs. We've talked about mummification and tomb preparation. We talked about the Epic of Gilgamesh. So many different aspects of afterlife beliefs. And with that being all wrapped up now, as we did last week, we are going to look at today's main marks. There's going to be 4 of them again, kind of like 3.5, but one of them's pretty long. So we're going to look at today's main marks. All right, so today's main marks. Number 1, from Sir Henry Norman's The People and Politics of the Far East from 1895. Norman was a liberal British parliamentarian and a government minister whose collection is now owned by the University of Cambridge. Norman gives an eyewitness accounts of various physical punishments and tortures inflicted in the magistrate's court, and of the execution by beheading of 15 men. He also gave a graphic account of Ling Chi, the death by 1,000 cuts execution, but does not claim to have witnessed such an execution himself. Here's his little account of that, though. The executioner, grasping handfuls of the fleshy parts of the body, such as the thighs and breasts, slices them away. The limbs are cut off piecemeal at the wrist and ankles, the elbows and knees, the shoulders and hips. Finally, the condemned is stabbed to the heart and the head is cut off. And piecemeal, I didn't know what piecemeal meant. It means kind of like sporadically, all over the place, uncoordinated cutting or, measurement of this or that. And so, like, it's just, slice here, slice there, no length of measure in slicing, no exact placement of slicing. It's just, kind of, like I said, sporadically slicing, different lengths, different depths, different this and that, different places. And as it says, they are going to start with your wrists and your ankles, your elbows and your knees, your shoulders and your hips. They're going to work your way up your limbs until they get to your core body, and then finally stab you in the heart and behead you, decapitate you, cut off your head, and boom, bang, bam, you are done. Number 2, we are going to look at some near-death experiences. good old near-death experiences. A couple different examples of them, exactly. So, first one, in 2001, in a 2001 study by renowned cardiologist Pim van Lommel, 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 a man who had been in a deep coma later told a nurse that he recognized her. He told her that he saw her when she had placed his dentures during resuscitation efforts, and then described the cart where she had placed them. This is exactly where they had been placed. They were in the precisely exact spot that he described it. And number two, one man had a near-death experience as a child, recalled the experience of meeting dead relatives. There were some presents, there, like people presence type of thing. There were some ladies, I didn't know them at the time. They were so wonderful and so loving, and I just didn't want to come back. I didn't see any pictures of them until I was an adult. And then I said, oh yeah, they were my great-grandmothers who had died years before I was born. So he actually, had this near-death experience and pictured being with his great-grandparents, his great-grandmothers in particular, who had died before he was born, and he was there with them in this area. They were being very kind to him. He didn't want to go back. And then he finally sees pictures of them and is like, I fucking saw them when I was a kid. I couldn't have seen them when I was a kid. But near my near-death experience, my NDE that happened, I remember seeing these relatives. The third one, often people relay their near-death experience as a review of their lives. Though life review experiences cannot be deemed scientifically veridical, they are worth noting. They can have a profound effect on the near-death experiences, the person who experiences this near-death experience, and can sometimes cause them to re-examine their lives and morals. Below, what we're going to talk about right now, is a doctor's description of the life review of a near-death experience patient. So the doctor said, when he realized that a collision was imminent, the patient said that time seemed to slow down as he hit the brakes and went into an uncontrolled slide. Then he seemed to pop out of his body. While in this state, he had a life review, which consisted of brief pictures, flashes of his life. His car struck the truck, and the truck bed crashed through the window, causing multiple injuries to his head and chest. Medical reports showed that he was in a coma and nearly died. Yet, he had a vivid sensation of leaving his physical body and entering into the darkness. He had the feeling of moving up through a dark tunnel towards a point of light. And suddenly, a being filled with love and light appeared to him. Now, he had a second life review, or a proper life review. One guided by the hand of a being of light. He felt bathed in love and compassion as he reviewed the moral choices he had made in his lifetime. He suddenly understood that he was an important part of the universe, and that his life had a purpose. So it took up until that point to this near-death experience to really understand that he was an important part of this universe, even if he wasn't doing maybe everything that he should have, even if his life hadn't brought him exactly to the point he believed it would. He had a purpose, he had a part in this universe, and his life had meaning, and this near-death experience showed him that. And I think that's beautiful. I think that's a part of near-death experiences that is kind of looked over. They're like, oh God, you got to meet people. Oh, you saw light at the end of the tunnel. And at the end of the day, even if people don't believe in it, it's still incredible that someone can have such an experience, and then it can show them that they have meaning. It can show them where they belong. It can show them a new direction in life so much so that maybe they even completely change themselves. It's inspiring, and it's touching in a lot of ways, and it's incredible to hear about. The fourth one, some people who experience near-death experiences, report stories of being out-of-body or out-of-body experiences, including traveling through walls to the waiting room where they saw their relatives and friends, say if they were in a hospital. One patient reported traveling through a wall and seeing her young daughter wearing mismatched plaids, which was highly unusual. Another woman traveled through a wall and overheard her brother-in-law in the hospital waiting room talking to a business associate in a very derogatory manner. She was even able to report this back to him later, along with parts of his actual dialogue, which is incredible. So she could actually recall, like, hey, you said this, and this is, how you responded. Your body tone was like this. Your voice tone was like this. Your inflection was like this. You said these derogatory things. Like, being able to recall that when you're in a completely separate room, a completely separate place, you're under trying to get surgery, you're in a coma, anything of that nature. You have these out of body experiences where your soul, quote unquote, lifts out of your body and actually goes and views different parts of your life or of the world, and then returns to you before you actually gain consciousness again, which is interesting to think about. And I understand a lot of times when it comes to hallucinations and people taking psychedelics that they can have these experiences also. And I've never done like a champion dose of mushrooms or, a god dose of fucking LSD or anything, but I could see where it comes from for sure. And, dabbling in psychedelics a little bit here and there, I definitely understand where you could get a view of maybe seeing yourself from out of body, or if you looked in a mirror and stared at yourself, you might have a weird experience where you're viewing yourself, but you're also viewing yourself from a different angle than the angle you're looking at. It's just some crazy this and that. But being able to actually recall parts of someone's dialogue when you were definitely not in the room with them is pretty fucking incredible, pretty crazy in a lot of different ways. And so we're going to talk about one last one. Number 5, our fifth near-death experience here. A blind woman has her sight restored, which is crazy to think about. So, as mentioned above, there were some blind people who reported having these NDEs. We've not talked about any, but in this story in particular, psychiatrist Brian Wise tells a story of a blind elderly woman. So he says, she suffered a cardiac arrest during her stay in the hospital where Dr. Wise, was the chairman of the psychiatric department. She was unconscious as the resuscitation team tried to revive her, and according to her later report, she floated out of her body and stood near the window watching the resuscitation efforts. She observed without any pain whatsoever as they thumped on her chest and pumped air into her lungs. During the resuscitation, a pen fell out of the doctor's pocket and rolled somewhere near the same window where her out-of-body spirit was standing and watching. The doctor eventually walked over, picked up the pen, and put it back in his pocket. He then rejoined the frantic effort to save this lady. And they succeeded. She would come back, she would be alive, she would be brought back by these doctors after going, into complete, heart failure, heart stoppage. She had this heart attack, this cardiac incident where her heart stopped and she was no longer breathing. They were able to bring her back out of that, and she watched this whole thing happen from an out-of-body experience where she was just over by the window just watching this happen. A few days later, she told the doctor that she had observed the resuscitation team at work during her cardiac arrest. "No," he soothingly assured her, "you were probably hallucinating because of the anoxia, the lack of oxygen to the brain," which is another thing that could happen. If you start lacking oxygen to your brain, you can get these pinpoint things happening where you're seeing tunnels almost, and you can start hallucinating a little bit. So that could be part of some of these near-death experiences also, where a lack of oxygen or blood to the brain could cause different things to happen, different hallucinations to happen, different pinpoint type of things to happen. And he reassured her that you were probably hallucinating, and it's not possible. This can happen when your heart stops beating, he says. "But I saw your pen roll over to the window," she replied. Then she described the pen and other details of the resuscitation. The doctor was completely shocked, to say the least. His patient had not only been comatose during the resuscitation, she has also been blind for many years. This blind lady who was comatose and, not breathing, was not conscious at all during this resuscitation, during this time in this room, during the time he dropped his pen that rolled over to the window. She was not conscious during that time, and she's also blind, and somehow she was able to describe all of these things that happened. She was able to describe what happened during the resuscitation efforts, and was able to describe this doctor, his pen, how he dropped it, exactly what this pen looked like, and how they finished off this resuscitation effort to bring her back. She was able to do all of this, and it just blew this doctor's mind. And I mean, it's the same type of thing. Like, there's no fucking way this lady can know that all this shit happened, especially being blind, for one, along with being unconscious and, semi-comatose. And she was able to describe all these things to the doctor. And it's hard to say exactly what could have caused that, other than her actually being able to see it from a different angle than her body was at. And it's she could make up a story, but how did she have so many crazy details about exactly what happened during this resuscitation? There's just so many questions that come with these NDEs, these near-death experiences, and the, resulting fascination that happens when someone, especially like this one, where someone has so many details, so many things that they couldn't have known otherwise unless this did happen. And it's just, it's fuel for thought. It gives you something to think about, gives you something to kind of ponder as we roll into our last main mark here. So number 3, it's going to be our last one. I told you like 3.5. That last one was a little long. So 3, some new information along with our near-death experience stuff there, which was newer information. Just 21 countries in the world carried out a death penalty in 2012, when a decade prior there was 28 countries who committed an execution or death penalty, and in 2022, Amnesty International recorded at least 1,153 executions in 16 countries. So down even further than the 21 in 2012. In that decade, it's went down even more, but the number of executions has actually went up a little bit throughout the years. It kind of varies from one year to another. There was 1,153 in 2022. In 2023, there was like 2,000 or something like that. It went up like 30-something%. So it varies. It varies a little bit, but the number of countries who perform these executions has generally been going down every year. It's going in the direction of most places are starting to disregard capital punishment as being part of their punishment system. And so out of those 1,153 executions in 2022, Iran led the way tremendously. So incredibly, so many more, incredibly, and an absurd amount more of executions in Iran than anywhere else in the world, any other country in the world. Iran had over 850. I think it said 853 plus. So there's probably some that were maybe executions but unaccounted for, or some people who were probably executed but they aren't sure. And that's number 1 in the world, 850 plus, followed by Saudi Arabia, who only performed 172. And then there was the United States, who performed only 24 that year, which is crazy to think about. There's so many executions in the world, and the majority of them are taking place in fucking Iran. And the United States, while we still do condone it, and there are still states who practice it, like Texas, who by far has always been our number 1 state with executions because they love killing people, I guess. We still, condone it. We still have it as part of our punishment system, the death penalty there. And it's hard to say because there has been so many people over the years who have been executed who were not worthy of that punishment, who really did not deserve that punishment, or maybe in the end also were not guilty of the crime that they were punished for. Maybe they did do something, but maybe it wasn't as serious. Maybe they didn't murder someone. Maybe someone else was the murderer. Maybe they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, type of thing. And there's been numerous accounts of that over the years. There's been numerous times where people have been taken off of death row to be put into like life in prison or resentenced to a new sentence because new evidence was found that showed that they didn't do what they said or were convicted of originally, or maybe they weren't the only one. It wasn't as serious. There were other circumstances to it. There's so many factors that go into these penalties, that go into these punishments, and a lot of the times it's like a 50-50 toss-up. You never know exactly if the person truly deserves it. I mean, there are certainly scenarios. The main murderers you think about nowadays, John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer, fucking Ed Gein, all these crazy psycho motherfuckers that are out there, and that really, have numerous, countless bodies underneath of them that have admitted to a lot of the things that they did, that have given details about a lot of their crimes. Those people, for sure, just fucking kill them. Get them off this earth. Get them out of here. They are fucking around. They are doing nothing to contribute to society in a positive manner. So get them out of here. But there's just so many people out there that could maybe not really be deserving of the death penalty that they are currently charged and prosecuted with. They're convicted and sentenced to this death penalty, and maybe they don't deserve it. But With that, with talking about all these executions and this afterlife, with all this information that we've tackled over the past 2 weeks, we are now going to look at our final takeaways before getting the fuck on out of here. Alright, so from the eerie silence of ancient tombs to the violent echoes of the execution chamber, from sacred funeral rites to chilling near-death experiences, humanity's relationship with death is as complex as it is inevitable. You know, everyone's going to die at some point. Across time and cultures, we've sought to control, honor, and understand what comes after our final breath. Through rituals meant to guide the dead, punishments designed to deter the living, and beliefs that offer both comfort and terror. But in the end, death remains the ultimate mystery. Whether it's a gateway to another existence, a cycle that repeats, or simply the end, one thing is certain. It's something we all must face. Perhaps that's why we cling so tightly to the stories of spirits, legends of the afterlife, and ancient traditions meant to ease our passage into the unknown. So, as we close the book on tonight's journey, ask yourself, what do you believe happens after we die? Is there peace, judgment, or something else entirely waiting beyond the veil? Whatever the answer, whatever your answer is, one thing is clear. Death is not just an end, but a story. It's a legacy that you make. One that has shaped humanity for thousands of years and will continue to do so long after we're gone. So remember that and put the most into your life. Make a legacy, create something for yourself, embrace death. One of the best things I heard, I was listening to a Great Courses Plus class about death, dying, death rituals throughout the world. And the gentleman who was speaking, the professor who was actually giving this whole lesson, these numerous lessons that covered different religions, different rituals, different rites throughout the world, he said, when you are walking, just walk. When you are eating, just eat. And when you are dying, just die. I want to say thank you for joining me tonight on Beneath the Shadows. I really appreciate you being here. Please remember, if you like this episode, if you like this two-parter, please let me know. Give me a rating, give me a review. Apple Podcast is a great place to do it. It really helps boost me up charts and, get other people listening to the show. But also Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, if you're on there, if you're on any of those, wherever you listen to your podcast, please give me a rating, give me a review, give me a thumbs up, give me a like, whatever it might be. I really appreciate you being here and doing that for me. Other than that, please check out the show on Instagram at Beneath the Shadows Podcast, and then also try and check out the group on Facebook. There is a Beneath the Shadows Podcast group on Facebook I just put up. Please check those out. I will try to keep all of them updated as shows come out and, each week as a new episode comes out. And I'm going to try to also do some short clips here and there as I get more caught up on things and get things kind of put into place a little bit better. Beyond that, let's look ahead to next week. Next week, we are headed to Vallecito, Colorado. Vallecito is in southern Colorado, just outside of Durango, Colorado, and we are going to look at the unfortunate, tragic, and downright despicable murder of Dylan Redwine that happened in 2012. Dylan, a 13-year-old boy from Colorado, was egregiously murdered in 2012. His body would be partially found in 2013 and 2015, and it was a likely suspect who ended up perpetrating this crime. And if you're interested in understanding and knowing why and who did it, please come back next week. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you stopping through. New listeners, returning, first time, whatever you are, whoever you are, thank you for fucking being here. And until next time, stay curious, stay intrigued, stay informed, and keep coming back to just Beneath the Shadows. Peace out, y'all. Wow, 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 wow.